is?
Tick.
Thought it was
Just
Scott.
reminds me of the clock.
Yes, you're on.
Scott, your eyes are getting sleepy. I'm
Yes.
on. I'm on. Welcome to Thursday Bible Study. We're in the 13th chapter of Mark. I'm Reverend Charlie Hara, pastor at Christ Church, Post Office Box 312, Marmora, New Jersey, 08223. Phone number is 609-515-1421. Are you showing all of this? Well, in case they're hard
Showing
of
you
hearing.
reading the card or showing?
Yeah, no, all of it. Email is pastorcharlie, I-E, at christchurch.church, website christchurch.church. If you do a Facebook or YouTube search, it's Christ Church Upper Township. So welcome to Thursday. We're at the Seashore Community Church of the Nazarene in beautiful downtown Irma, New Jersey, high atop the Irma Inn in beautiful downtown Irma, New Jersey. We are in the side room called the conference room, and we're conferring together and plotting things that we really can't let you know unless you're a two-star general, we were told about today. We're in the 13th chapter of Mark, and this, for me, is worth the price of admission. This, along with Matthew 24 and Luke 21, is where I got excited again in the Word of God. It was back in 1980, so all the way back then, how many years is that? 40? 41? Is that 41? 31? It's 41. Yeah.
41, that's what I said.
Yeah, thank you. This is Jim. He never graduated from second grade arithmetic, but we love him. Let's read from Mark chapter 13. Let's go 1 to 31. We won't do all of those. In fact, I think Chris, our faithful cameraman, post-production, pre-production, and mid-production director, is titling this Mark 13 Part 1. Is that what you titled it?
You got it.
Okay, so here's Part 1. Let's read the first 31, and we'll study probably 3 or 4. I want to take our time on this. I know that sends a panic and a shudder into everyone, knowing that it was 7 years ago that we started the Gospel of John, and we still haven't finished it. But enough about my pain and sorrow. Let's talk about your pain and sorrow. Mark 13, 1 to 31. Sure, Scott, you can read for us.
Thanks for volunteering.
He's not nearly as grumpy as he was last week.
No, I will comply. Resistance is futile. As Jesus was leaving the temple, one of the disciples said to him, "Look, teacher, what massive stones, what magnificent buildings." "Do you see all these great buildings?" replied Jesus. "Not one stone here will be left on another. Every one will be thrown down." As Jesus was sitting on the Mount of Olives opposite the temple, Peter, James, John, and Andrew asked him privately, "Tell us, when will these things happen? And what will be the sign that they are all about to be fulfilled?" Jesus said to them, "Watch out that no one deceives you. Many will come in my name, claiming, 'I am he,' and will deceive many. When you hear of wars and rumors of wars, do not be alarmed. Such things must happen, but the end is still to come. Nation will rise against nation, and kingdom against kingdom. There will be earthquakes in various places and famines. These are the beginnings of birth pains. You must be on your guard. You will be handed over to the local councils and flogged in the synagogues. On account of me, you will stand before governors and kings as witnesses to them. And the gospel must first be preached to all nations. Whenever you are arrested and brought to trial, do not worry beforehand about what to say. Just say whatever is given to you at the time, for it is not you speaking, but the Holy Spirit. Brother will betray brother to death, and a father his child. Children will rebel against their parents and have them put to death. Everyone will hate you because of me, but the one who stands firm to the end will be saved. When you see the abomination that causes desolation standing where it does not belong, let the reader understand. Then let those who are in Judah flee to the mountains. Let no one on the housetop go down or enter the house to take anything out. Let no one in the field go back to go get their cloak. How dreadful it will be in those days for pregnant women and nursing mothers. Pray that this will not take place in winter, because those will be the days of distress unequaled from the beginning, when God created the world until now, and never to be equaled again. If the Lord had not cut short those days, no one would survive. But for the sake of the elect whom he has chosen, he has shortened them. At the time, if anyone says to you, "Look, here is the Messiah," or "Look, there he is," do not believe it. For false messiahs and prophets will appear and perform signs and wonders to deceive, if possible, even the elect. So be on your guard. I have told you everything ahead of time. But in those days following that distress, the sun will be darkened and the moon will not give its light. The stars will fall from the sky and the heavenly bodies will be shaken. At that time, people will see the Son of Man coming in the clouds with great power and glory. And he will send his angels and gather his elect from the four winds, from the ends of the earth to the ends of the heavens. Now learn this lesson from a fig tree. As soon as the twigs get tender and its leaves come out, you know that summer is near. Even so, when you see these things happening, you know that it is near, right at the door. Truly, I tell you, this generation will certainly not pass away until all these things have happened. Heaven and earth will pass away, but my words will never pass away.
Thank you, my dear brother. Our resident lector, the Honorable Scott Van Voorst, or as he says, Squat Van Voorst. What do you see here?
You have no filter.
I don't. I had one, but it clogged long ago, and I can't afford to change it. Kathy's here. How are you? Thank you, Margie and Kathy, for rescuing this and it becoming a den of thieves and robbers and men. We're in the 13th chapter of Mark's Gospel, and Scott just read the first 31 verses, and he's not about, well, go ahead and read it again for Kathy. What do you see here? What do you see here, guys and ladies? Mark 13, 1 to 31. We've turned the page, as I told you last week, with the questions of Jesus and then the widow's offering and all of that. We have no more public ministry, as it were. Jesus has now turned inward, and you'll see we need chairs, it looks like. Chairs.
Awesome.
Some chairs. Welcome.
Hi there.
Welcome. How are you? Well, we're on video. Just make sure your makeup is
It's good.
Yeah.
Hair done.
Non-existent.
We are usually in a different room, but we're videoing today, and I wanted a close-up. So,
We're normally late like this. So
yeah, no, I haven't seen you in a year or so, and it's good to see that nothing's changed.
Right, yes.
Yeah.
We're the same.
They just got in from Lancaster County, and boy, are their arms tired. Thank you.
Not mine this year. Oh, I see it. Sure.
Now, keep them from me. I have a restraining order against them both. There's a restraining order against both of them. I owe them money, so if you'd help me out,
But
Jim.
he's been dabbling in.
I got one on each side of me. We've come to that point where we need to make some introductions. So make some introductions. I'm Charlie Harrell.
I'm Michelle Curtis.
I'm John Clary.
Steve Thompson.
Scott.
SWAT.
I'm sorry. Don't use that against him because it'll bite me.
Jim Morrow.
Tomorrow. Switch those names. If you will. Yeah, he's Chris McHugh. He's Jim Morrow.
Should I stop recording?
Yeah, I would. I would have about 5 minutes ago.
Just start it.
I'm Shirley Temple. I don't know what's going on.
Here's Soupy Sales, Jack Lemon, and this obviously is a Van Vorst of the Palermo Van Vorst. Where did it go wrong, Scott?
At the beginning.
But December 28, 1954, when I was born. Thanks a lot, man.
Rewind. Yeah,
Okay,
done it.
I think it's out. Remember,
Should I make this part 1A?
remember, I'm glad to be away from the house. And the longer I can prolong this, the better for me. The grandkids are visiting. Can you feel my pain? I love them, and I enjoy this Bible study more than I should. We're in Mark chapter 13. Mark 13.
It's a home Lancaster.
Now,
Probably.
these two are fairly impoverished. They have one Bible within the whole family, several. Yeah. They've just moved in and they haven't unpacked. Is that true, by the way?
Well, we're unpacked. We're slowly bringing stuff down
Yeah.
and deciding on whether we're going to just move down or stay half and half or what we're going to do.
Yeah.
We don't know yet.
So you guys are bi. Is that
Yeah.
it?
We're a little mixed up.
Yeah. I've never known you in a different way.
It's true.
Hold on until he gets a
I
Bible,
forget
then
you.
we'll start in. Or are we on still?
We're on,
Ay, ay,
still.
ay.
They didn't kick us off yet.
Just get started.
Well, Mark,
24 minutes.
Mark 13, 1 to 31. We have just cracked it open. We read it. Let me ask, what do you see here? We'll start there. Please edit in post-production. Mark 13, 1 to 31. What do you see here, as Scott had read for us? What do we call this? Do you remember a name we give to this entire chapter? This is so important. Matthew gives it 2 chapters. Matthew 24 and 25 is dedicated to this discourse. There's a hint. Olivet Discourse. This is the Olivet Discourse. Why is it called the Olivet Discourse?
Because in verse 3, he's out on the Mount of Olives opposite the temple.
There you go. So for a fancy term for sitting down on the Mount of Olives, we call it Olivet. That's where it took place. It's on the east side of Jerusalem. He sat down, and this discussion, this discourse, this private teaching, because as we said at the end of chapter 12, he's done the public ministry. This is now him turning inward. Within 3 days, he'll be dead. And he's now passing the gauntlet in a very serious and deliberative way to the disciples. So here is one of them. This is the Mount of Olives discourse. Matthew 24, 25, Mark 13, Luke 21. John doesn't have it in his gospel, but it's everything that John was interested in. Why doesn't John have an Olivet discourse in his gospel? Well, hang on till Mark chapter 13, section part 4 or 5 down the road, and we'll answer that one. 1V, IV, which is what I need. How does the story set up? Look at verse 1. Just get verse 1 in front of you. because that is about as pregnant a verse as you can get. Somebody read it for us again, please. Any of you able to read?
As Jesus was leaving the temple, one of his disciples said to him, "Look, teacher, what massive stones, what magnificent buildings."
Okay. Now then, as Jesus is leaving the temple, should give you a Old Testament nudge, nudge, poke, poke. Do you know where you see him leaving? You can find it in 1 Samuel. When he got fed up with the sin of Israel, it was none other than the Philistines who came by, picked up the ark, and carted it off into the wilderness, and out went the ephod one way, and the high priest another way, and the temple or the tabernacle furnishings went another way, and that became a prolonged 100-year dispersion of the entire tabernacle framework. Nobody had the parts to get worship going again. You get it again in Ezekiel's, listen, you got to have them all. Ezekiel chapters 8 to 11. Read it sometime. 8, 9, 10, 11, 4 whole chapters where you watch this take place. The glory of God was in the temple, but God saw the idolatry that was going on in the temple, and then slowly you see the glory of God leave the ark or the Holy of Holies and go out and stand at the threshold. In other words, the front door of the temple. Then you see him leaving out of the temple proper, out onto the mount, and then the presence of the Lord, the glory of the Lord, by about the 10th chapter, is standing over on the Mount of Olives, and he keeps heading east. He's leaving in an eastern direction. Why? He's heading to where Ezekiel was. He's going to sit, the presence of God, out with the refugees, out with the exiles, by the Kibar River or Kibar Canal. He's going to go to Babylon. Why? Because the same thing that happened to get the whole tabernacle dispersed is now happened again in roughly 5th century, we'll say 6th century. It's about 590 that all of this starts taking place. By 587, you've got the temple destroyed. This is what is called the desolation. God gets fed up with the disgusting conditions of his house, and he simply leaves. He is departed. So when Mark tells you that the Lord Jesus was leaving the temple, you need to listen with a head hung low. This isn't a good sign. If Jesus is indeed God, this is just like it was under the tabernacle and under the temple destructions. God's leaving the place. He's done with it. So that second temple cleansing that we looked at a couple of chapters ago has now come true. If, in fact, the rock comes back on the second inspection, this is out of Leviticus 14, then you tear it down. So then, look how magnificent this building is, how big these stones are. What massive stones, what magnificent buildings. Do you know how massive the stones were? Any idea? One of the stones in the temple complex, and it's still there, down at what we refer to very snidely and rudely as the Wailing Wall. No Jew would want you to call it the Wailing Wall. It's the Western Wall. It is the foundational parts that Solomon put in and Herod added to. There is one stone there, one, it's 11 feet high by 40 feet long or wide, and goes, they don't know how far, but the estimate is perhaps as many as 30 feet, and has a weight of 250 to 300 tons. Those are sizable rocks, do you see? Still there, and you can see it. Massive stones, and what magnificent buildings. I mean, at its height, this thing is a 10-story building, which I realize in our day and age is nothing, but in their day and age, this was an incredible sight. The Temple of Jehovah in Jerusalem was made of native limestone, meaning very white, and covered with gold, and out in front there was a massive, I'm talking, close to 300 feet long and about a foot thick tapestry out on the, not 300 foot, 80 feet long and about a foot thick tapestry out on the front, colorful, beautiful. You spoke of purple threads. It had purple and blue and gold woven into it. It was of the constellations and the night sky, and it had all kinds of zodiac symbols on it. It was a magnificent thing. All of that is there. As the sun rose in the east and set in the west, it was pointing towards the east. It would have caught all the sun in the morning. It would have been dazzling. And as they're leaving the temple, going down the Kidron Valley and up onto the mountain on the east side of Jerusalem, it's common for them to turn around and say, wow, what a sight. This is better than the World Trade Center ever dared to be. And that's when Jesus says what? Not one stone's going to be left on top of another. What do we, take a pause, step back a minute before we go into it. What do we usually do with this chapter? What do we use this chapter basically for?
Death and resurrection.
Death and resurrection, okay. What was done in my childhood and way into my education was that this is about the end of the world. Wars and rumors of wars and earthquakes and famines and the massive apostasy where brother turns against brother and false prophets and false messiahs, and you go down through and you get to the part about the sun turning dark, moon turning to blood, and the stars falling out of the sky. If that's not the end of the world, what is? And then you read about, unless these days had been cut short, the abomination of desolation. We throw all of those things in, and the group that I was trained under, a bunch of Baptists, and the Bible study I went to, Matthew 24 and 25, Mark 13, Luke 21 was evidence of the signs of the end of the world. And we then kept look in the Time, Newsweek, and the U.S. News and World Report, and the U.S. Weekly, and National Enquirer. That was always a valued source of information. The National Enquirer sold at your local grocery store. If anything was going to give you the end time scenarios, it was the National Enquirer. Why would it ever lie? And Jesus comes along, and we never ever quite, and this is a bone of contention with me, I never ever got any pastor to ever tell me, oh, by the way, look at the first 3 verses if you want to study the chapter. The first 3 verses are, look at this magnificent building and the massive stones, and he says, not one stone will be left on top of another. Wow, that seems like it's fairly narrow in meaning. And they then come to him and ask him in a follow-up, they ask him 2 questions, 3 if you're in Matthew. What the follow-up questions?
When?
As he was sitting the opposite of the temple, verse 3, Peter and James and Andrew ask him privately. So this isn't the big public displays he's been giving us about the questions and answers, nor is it a big, this is privately. I told you it's private ministry now. And he sits them down and notice things like, it'd be better if this doesn't happen in winter. Nobody ever explained why we shouldn't want the end of the world to come in winter. What's that got to do with anything? What's it matter if you're in Jerusalem at that time, if it's the end of the world? No matter where you are, it's the end of the world. And why would being in winter matter? Or if you're pregnant, what does that mean? We don't want the end of the world to come and Jesus to return if there are any pregnant women around? He's mentioning something quite exact here, quite specific. And we can learn so much from it if we've got teachable hearts and obedient spirits. So he answers them. Or the question, verse 4, is what? What is the questions? 2.
When?
When will these things happen, and what will be the sign that they're about to be fulfilled? When will these things happen? And what is the sign that they're about to be fulfilled? 2 questions. Now notice this. If I really want to get an understanding of their question, I ought to then believe that they're asking it about his statement. What has he just said? Not one stone here will be left on another. Every one will be thrown down. Tell us, when will these things happen? The simplest way to take this is the referent to these things is to what he had just said. They get him away from the crowd, get him to sit down in the coolness of the olive groves, and they say, tell us, when is this going to happen? And give us some signs that this thing's about to be fulfilled. And Jesus answers those 2 very questions. You want to know when no stone's going to be left on top of another? You want to know when everything's thrown down? Let me tell you. It's this, and this, and this, and this, and this. And when you see these stacking together, you know it's coming to an end. Now, what's coming to an end? If you've got the NIV, as Scott and I do, it has the little subheading called Signs of the End of the Age. That's okay. You can use that one. That's permissible, as long as you do not infer that the end of the age is the end of the world. This is the signs of the end of the old covenant. The signs of the old nation. This is the signs of the old order of things. Because behold, all things are new. In the old order, you made sacrifices at that temple of animals. But we have a new once-for-all sacrifice of Jesus Christ. Do we need a temple if there's no more animals to be slain? Nope, don't need it. Now you know why it's coming down. Plus, there's a new and better temple. A new and better temple, you say? And I say, absolutely. Where'd you hear that from? Jesus. Is he or is he not? The Word became flesh and tabernacled among us. Jesus is our temple. Temple is where you go to meet God. Temple is where you go to pray. Jesus is our high priest. You got a new and better temple, not only in the person of Jesus Christ, but you and I are the temple of the Holy Spirit. In other words, this act that we've got set up for us here, or this that it's about to take place, is where you and I came from. This is God decentralizing the whole thing. There was a time at which the only place to worship God in the manner he wanted was in Jerusalem. Now look at us. On the backside of a pimple of New Jersey, in a small little church, a bunch of measly mid-century ancient adults. Heaven forbid, Scott Van Voorst is our youth group here. You get the idea. Scott, if it weren't for you, there'd be no humor in this room. You realize that. And you
My
can,
expense.
No. Do you feel that way, really? If you do, if you don't, I'll keep it coming. No, I'm the idiot in the room, and I refuse to give up the title. I have the crown, and I wear it well. You've got the new and better covenant. He held up the old covenant meal of Passover and said, this is the Last Supper, fellas. This is now thought, I want you to now connect this Passover bread, this matzah, to me, because my body is broken for you. And this cup is the new covenant in my blood. Behold, all things are new. Behold, all things are new. And instead of a nation being the channel of redemption, it's going to be him going into all the nations and establishing the channel of redemption. We sat down in a cheap taco joint, 4 of us this afternoon, and in came a brother named Mark. And Mark blessed us, and he prayed for us, and he told us secrets and signs and wonders that none of us knew, and it was a really fun time. But there it is. The gospel has gone all over the world, so that one guy out of Phoenixville and his lovely wife, who's one-eyed, apparently, is able to bless us at a cheap Mexican joint as we're working our way into gaseous stupors. The point of all of that is the gospel has decentralized, and you can now go everywhere, including Taco on the Green or whatever it's called. Actually,
Taco by the sea.
Taco by the Sea. You just turn green when you eat it. How is it that you know these things, John?
Don't.
You know, we will edit that out, but you don't hold a thing back, man.
I just told Jim the same thing yesterday. It's not one of the best places to eat.
You know, except for the, you know, the Pepto-Bismol dessert I took, it was pretty good. Anyway, let me get back here. I can't be around people.
Right. I was sitting there when I got disrupted and ate at my place.
Did you? Is that what it was? But notice this, if you had eaten down there, it would have cost you a whole lot less. You know, yeah, ptomaine would have been a possibility, but it would have been cheaper.
That's Chinese food, right?
Yeah. All right, so let's start taking it apart. What's this about? Let me give it to you in a nutshell. If this isn't about the end of the world, this is about the end of what? The end of Israel. And everything in Israel has now become obsolete with the presence of Jesus Christ. He's the high priest. You don't need a priesthood. You don't need a building because you don't need sacrifices. He's the sacrifice. Oh, we remember his sacrifice. That's what the table of remembrance is, or the Lord's Supper. And yeah, you still need some rituals. We don't have to go to the temple in order to do circumcisions. No, including women. Women can now hold the mark of Christ on their body. It's called baptism. It's a new and better covenant. So where do you go with this? What are you going to do with the old one? We have had 4,000 years, basically, of history here. We're in our, our 40th book of the Bible. Those other 39 in the Old Testament has brought us to the point at which Israel is reality, and Israel has given us the prophets, and Israel has been everything. But now that it's met its need, what are we going to do with it? What are we going to do with it? And the answer is, if you think Israel as a nation is just simply going to disappear, think again. It took us 39 books to get it to this point. Now it's served its point, and you're going to see then, as it were, the folding up of Israel. It's obsolete. Listen to it, and it'll help you. Peter will call it this, and so will Paul, and the author of Hebrews. We're done with the elementary things. Elementary things? Yeah. Israel was the ABCs of God's redemptive plan. Now that we've mastered that, now that Christ has come to fulfill it, now we get the meat and the strength and the, forgive it, the moral of this whole entire enterprise. This means something. We're now mature. We're now going to see certain things happen. So if this is that historical, what do you look for? Jesus now gives us the signs that go with this. Have I got you at least up to where you get me with this? Is this monumental shift? It's a monumental shift, but you tell me where I've gone astray so far. They look at the building. They say, isn't it magnificent? Look at the stones, how massive. He says, not one stone will be left on top of another until all of this is come down. You'll not see anything. It's going to be torn down. Now then, I've got history on my side as well. This happened just like it said in the year AD 70. AD 70. With everything in us, the best history we can put together, Jesus is stating this in AD 30. April of AD 30. By August of AD 70, it's gone. That is indisputable. That you cannot explain away. Notice this, other than this and his own death, you have very little prophecy about Jesus, from Jesus. He tells us about his death and how, and that was point to point, but we have very little prophecy other than that. Wouldn't you expect Jesus to speak prophetically? He is. He's speaking about something that we also get the fulfillment on. And he says, I tell you, as he read it to us, verse 30, I tell you the truth, this generation will certainly not pass away until all of these things have happened. Now, if this is about the end of the world, unfortunately, there are no 2,000-year-old Jewish people walking around Jerusalem today. Unless this was about AD 70. And this happened just as he said. And by the way, generation varies, but generally it's considered 40 years. Now you do your gazintas here. It's the year 30 AD, and we're looking at a fulfillment of this in 70 AD. It sounds like 40 to me. But again, I'm not that bright, and I never graduated higher than Jim did in mathematics.
That was good.
My gazintas, you know what gazintas are, right?
I'm going to say
Jethro Bodine. We got to the sixth grade.
he was my
Clampett, Jed wanted to know what he'd studied in 6th grade, and he said, we studied our gazintas today. Jed scratches his head and says, what are gazintas? And he goes, that's where 2 goes into 4 2 times. 4 goes into 8 2 times, you know, gazintas.
Ellie Mae was good too.
She was pretty. I had a crush on Ellie Mae, but I had a crush on everybody on TV, including Uncle Joe. And
Careful.
I was a lonely kid.
What you just said, Ken Klein elaborated on every stone will be, and he said when they burned the temple, the gold melted, and they.
I told you that. Yes.
I thought it was Ken Klein.
No, I know Ken Klein, Charlie Hara. Yeah, that all of that gold on the front,
That's
because
amazing.
it was native limestone. Limestone has a high water content to it because it's sedimentary rock. The Romans knew what it was. In order to get to it, they simply set fires inside it, and there was plenty of wood around inside of it to set fires, and it was paneled and everything else. And as that water in the limestone expanded, it exploded the rock, and it fell down, and all of that gold and plenty of silver melted in between the cracks, and good old Caesar was not about to leave that kind of wealth for them to pilfer and get. So to this day, you can go to Temple Mount and see where they took it all apart,
Every stone.
and every stone was turned over to get to the gold. Every stone. There you go. Yep. History's on our side on this. I do not budge on this one. This is not something that I equivocate on. I had been taught this was the end of the world. I think we need to be aware of the coming of the Lord and look for his coming and shout hallelujah. At the same time, be alert to read carefully. And he's clearly making a reference to the temple here. And then it gets exciting for us so that we can take these one at a time and study them. The signs. Let me put it this way. If I'm right, then every one of these signs that he gives should have some kind of connection that we can make. You with me on that? I should be able to say, historically, this proves out, this is there, and they all line up. So let's look for the first sign he gives. Just continue picking away at this. He says, you want to know what the signs are? You want to know what to look for? Look for this. What's the first one?
No deceive you.
For what? What's the deceiving part?
False messiahs.
False messiahs. They're going to come and claim that Messiah has come. So when I see somebody or people coming and claiming to be Messiah, watch out. Now then, let me haul out, my friend, and why we're in this room today. I was going to juggle 2 books after 45 minutes and only about 10 minutes worth of footage. I now haul out my friend that I want to introduce you to. This is a book written by a man named Flavius Josephus. That's his Roman name. His Jewish name was Mariyahu. We say Matthew. Mariyahu. Mariyahu ben HaKohen. Excuse me. Let me get it straight. I had to start earlier. Yosef ben Mariyahu. Yosef ben Mariyahu HaKohen. There we go. Got it all. Joseph, ben, son of, Mariyahu, Matthew. HaKohen is the priest. He was from Galilee. He was born about this year, meaning 30. Maybe a little earlier, we don't know. He was from the town of Gamla, G-A-M-L-A. He rose in prominence as a Cohen, C-O-H-E-N, Jewish for priest. So anybody named Cohen or Cohen, they're claiming to be priestly. That and the Levite, Levine, and Levi, those are the only 2 connections we can make to Old Testament names. Were they, in fact, priests and Levites? Doubtful, but you can no longer say you're from the tribe of Issachar, Asher, or any of the others. Getting back to my friend Joseph. Yosef ben Mariyahu HaKohen was a general during the war of 67 to 73 AD. It's the Roman War. He was captured up at Gamla, leading an insurrection. And they, when they found out he was HaKohen and able to read and write, the Romans, forced him to Rome, and he became the court historian for the Flavian family. Flavius Josephus. Flavius, he's in the Flavian family. He's then brought in, as it were, and made a part of the family. He writes 3, actually 4, but the 3 that he's remembered for is Antiquities, which is where he explains to the Romans the Old Testament and all kinds of Old Testament stories. He writes the Book of Wars. That's about the wars of 67 to 73 AD. And then he writes a letter, and he writes his own biography. He writes a letter to, what's his name? Apocryphon? Apollyon? I don't know. You can get it. You can still find him in any bookstore. I would highly recommend, if you're going to study this too. This certainly is not equal to the scriptures, but he's a 1st century Jew, a historian from this time, and it's in Josephus that you get an extra biblical. Let me show you what I mean. This is God's word. It's true. That's the Bible. But over here is extra Bible. That is outside the Bible. It's beside the Bible. It's a source. And the amazing thing, he talks about John the Baptist. He talks about James, the half-brother of Jesus, and his martyrdom. He talks about Annas and Caiaphas. He talks about Pontius Pilate. He talks about Jesus and says that he was the Messiah, or at least it's reported of him to be the Messiah. He was not a believer of Jesus, and he also does this for us. If we treat this as Jesus' prophecy of what's going to happen in 40 years, he was there, lived through it, and he gives us records of it. You with me? Chris, you rolled your eyes. You with me on this? No? He gave us records. He's a bystander, and he's able to say certain things happen. Like, for instance, this one. Where'd it go? Somebody moves it on me every time. I used to have bloody, rusted paper clips, but I pulled them out. Listen to Josephus, and this is a translation of Josephus from the 1800s, so it's a little stilted until you're going to learn Latin and go at it from the primary sources. It'll have to do. Nero therefore bestowed a kingdom on the lesser Armenia upon Aristobulus, Herod's son, and he added Agrippa's kingdom, 4 cities, and the toppy areas of both belonging. Skipping down, let me just read this one. This is from the Book of Wars, Book 2, Chapter 13, Section 5. Did you get that? 2:13:5. There was an Egyptian false prophet that did the Jews more mischief than the former, for he was a cheat and pretended to be a prophet also, and got together 30,000 men that were deluded by him. Chris, call it what it is. It's a cult. He's got them together. These he led round about in the wilderness to the mount which is called the Mount of Olives, which was ready to break into Jerusalem by force from that place. And if he could but once conquer the Roman garrison, these people he intended to domineer over them by the assistance of those guards that were last to break into the city with him. But Felix prevented his attempt and met him with his Roman soldiers, and on and on. The Egyptian ran away with a few others, while the greatest part of those that were with him were either destroyed or taken alive, but the rest of the multitude was dispersed, every one to their own homes, and they concealed themselves there. What's the purpose of that? Prophets, false prophets, and false messiahs come out. Now, why did I read that one to you? So I could also read this one to you. I think I have it. Somebody turn to the book of Acts. This is just to show you there's some credibility in in Josephus. Where am I looking here? Acts chapter 8, verses 9 and 10. 8, 9, 10. Somebody want to read that one for us, please? Acts 8, verses 9 and 10. Anyone?
Now for some time a man named Simon had practiced sorcery in the city and amazed all the people of Samaria. He boasted that he was someone great, and all the people, both high and low, gave him their attention and exclaimed, "This man is the divine power known as the Great Power."
Okay, you got that one? Let me see if I can find the Egyptian then. Where did he go? That same Egyptian is referred to in Acts as well. So in Josephus, you get the Egyptian. In Acts, and I don't know where it's at. You'll have to look it up on your own. If somebody has a deal thing, what do you call it? A Google. If you can Google up the Egyptian in Acts, you can look it up and find out that Josephus tells you the truth. There's the Simon story, who you see gets a big following. That's roughly the year 40 or so. It's getting going. And Josephus tells you of the Sicarii movement that began to say, follow us. We'll show you great and mighty things that you won't believe. It gets ripping and roaring. Anybody find the Exodus one, or the Egyptian one? No? All right, well, none of you are cooperating with me today, and next week, I don't want any of you showing up here because you're not helping me one bit whatsoever. And I'm out here on the end of the diving board. Here it is, 21. I'll do my own work, thank you. No thanks to any of you. Acts 21. As the soldiers were about to take Paul into the barracks, 37 is what I'm looking at. He asked the commander, "May I say something to you?" "You speak Greek," he replied. "Aren't you the Egyptian who started a revolt and led 4,000 terrorists into the desert some time ago?" So that's Acts 21, verse 37 and following, just to show you that it's there. Same Egyptian. So here's Josephus telling us about an Egyptian who was behaving like a Messiah. That's where Paul shows up, and the guards question him and say, "Man, aren't you like the Egyptian that was doing all this stuff?" And Jesus says, "You'll know this place is coming down when you see a bunch of false messiahs hanging around." That begs the issue. Can we learn anything from this chapter? If this is all about AD 70, can we learn anything from it? And the answer is we can learn a whole lot from it if we're paying attention. My dear friends, there are more false messiahs in America in the year 2021 than I have ever witnessed. At least in the old days, we could tell a cult from the church. Now it's very hard because the cults seem to have publishing houses and do a lot by way of really wonderful music. You with me? And it's very difficult for me to sing songs from Redding, California, in certain places, knowing that the leadership are actually doing what you and I would, if it were anyone else, refer to as an occultic practice. They call it grave soaking or grave sucking. That's their expression, not mine, where they hope to gain the spirit from dead saints. That's the leaders of some of the churches that are mega churches and have not just an American influence, but a worldwide. So anything we can learn from here, there's everything we should learn from here, because there's a sense in which these days are no different from these days. We can apply this just as easily. Is it the end of the world? No more than that was the end of the world in AD 70. But it was the end of many things. And it was the end of the effectiveness of those that had apostated. You with me? Listen to me. It was signs for those that had grown unfaithful and refused Jesus and compromised their faith for the sake of political expediency and political appointments and political assignments, and basically began to worship the state instead of the Creator. Enough said? Let me get back then. I think you're with me on it. Messiahs, yeah, and there's plenty more where that came from in Josephus. I'll simply ask you to go look up Josephus, type in, just get false messiahs Josephus and see what you come up with. You can get Josephus online, the complete version, so you don't need to buy it. But if you want to, tell them Charlie sent you, and they'll give you a hard time. What else do you see? Look at verse 8. What else is going to happen?
Wars and rumors of wars.
Yeah, and nation rising against nation. I won't read it all. I just want you to see the passage that I found in Josephus It's just one of many. It was so bad in Israel. This is about the year 69. So bad that the Sea of Galilee, you saw the Sea of Galilee. If you see the saw, you've seen what you've seen. Got that? Sea of Galilee was one clot. It was running red from the death in it, and all the little wadis and tributaries ran into the Sea of Galilee because it's a catch basin, like so many bodies of water in Israel. It was a catch basin, and it caught the martyrs' blood. They died. It wasn't martyr. They were soldiers, and they tried to get away from the Romans in vessels, but they had superior weaponry in every sense of the word, and they were trying to escape in the little fishing boats, the kind that Jesus and Peter used, and they just hunted them down and slaughtered them mid-sea in the Sea of Galilee, which is only 6 miles wide, 8 miles at the widest. And it was red. And that portion of Josephus there, I'll give it to you so you can jot it down. You can look it up online. It doesn't read pretty, but why do you need pretty if you're reading about war and mayhem? Where'd it go? Somebody moved it on me again. She keeps giggling at me. I don't know what I'm supposed to do with that. I can tell you this. If I do, in fact, let Michelle in next week, I want her sitting down on that end. Here it is.
If you want to look at it, you should stop giggling.
What are you saying?
Yeah, thanks. Thanks a lot. Whose side are you on, Matt? It's Wars, Book 3, Chapter 10, Section 9. So let me give it to you again. 3, 10, 9. The lake was just pouring with dead bodies. Romans cut off either their heads or their hands, and they indeed were destroyed after various manners everywhere, till the rest, being put to flight, were forced to get on upon the land, while the vessels encompassed about them on the sea. Many of these were repulsed when they were getting ashore, and they were killed by the arrows upon the lake, and the Romans leaped out of their vessels and destroyed a great many more on the land. It goes on and on. I mean, it's just an entire chapter like that. And you say, well, Harry, I can see that it's a war, but that's just within Israel. And it says nation against nation. Yeah, but good Old Testament coming true. Remember Edom that gave Israel fits when it tried to march through? Back in the days of Moses, Edom shows up on this one. You got 1 minute? Edom shows up and they take part. They join ranks. The Edomites join ranks with the Romans, and they do their part on the south portion. And others as well, because Rome was an entire empire, and there were colonies that came marching against Israel in order to show Caesar that we are, in fact, loyal citizens. So what am I saying? I'm saying let's keep working along in this and show you that the earthquakes were real, but you're told about these things in the New Testament. Any wars in the New Testament? Good question, Charlie. And if I let you back in next week, we'll pick it up off of wars and go on from there. But Michelle, I'm going to enforce the restraining order on you, or at least the gag order. So with that, we'll buckle down and get busy. And if Scott would not be a bad influence on me.
You talked way too much today.
I did, yeah. Or he did,
Scott,
sure.
yeah.
Let's blame it on Scott. We love you, Scott. If it weren't so,
We were talking.
I hate to see what you do if you hated me.
what's that?
I said, I hate to see what you do if you hated me.
You wouldn't want to see it. I do to you. No, I'm not going to say it because it'll get back to my family and it'll be bad. So people have asked, I'll share this group because some of you were there on Sunday. Kathy doesn't know this. I was there for the family reunion. We're off, right?
No.
No? Oh, jeez. I told
Do
you.
you want to be done?
Yes,
Okay,
please.
so-
Bye.